tonight, 2020, the year that changed Britain.
We've gone from a pre-pandemic just under 1 million meals to now regularly more than 2 million meals being diverted to people in need every single week.
In the year of COVID, what were the big mistakes?
The decision to discharge patients from hospital into residential care homes was a monumental error of judgment.
What about the lives of expats in Wuhan, where it all started?
I'm just on my way home from work. My life is the same as it was before the pandemic started here.
And what of the year ahead?
The bounce back in 21 is going to be phenomenal. People just want to go out. People want to feel normal again.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Well, it's hard to believe we've made it to the end of 2020, the year COVID turned our lives upside down. So many have suffered bereavement and hardship. We've had to get used to our freedom curtailed. Other huge stories will go down in history too, not least our departure from the EU. But perhaps 2020 has reminded us what matters most: family, community, mutual support. And with the vaccines now here, hope.
The year began pretty much like many others. The Queen, still the longest reigning monarch in British history. A Conservative Prime Minister sitting in number 10 for the 10th consecutive year.
2020 is upon us, and now we have a wonderful opportunity to unite as a country and move forward together.
The economy riding high, with employment at record levels. And Britain preparing to go it alone, ready to make a clean break with the EU. But by late January, many in the scientific community were already expressing concern about the strange outbreak of pneumonia unfolding in China, more than 5,000 miles away. Professor Jonathan Ball was among them and went on tonight with this warning.
I think of all of the infections that we've looked at in the past decade or so, this one has the hallmarks of potentially being able to spread in human populations.
Though some experts reckoned it would blow over, Professor Ball wasn't so sure.
It's very difficult to know exactly how this will play out, but we may end up seeing lots of these infections arriving on our shores.
Expat Brits over in China gave us a glimpse of the lockdown to come.
Nan, hello.
One, Khan Lambert, in Wuhan teaching PE, was not only concerned for himself. His nan, Vera, had been left stranded after coming over to spend Christmas.
My grandson's just trying to get help to get me some more medication. I've got about 1 week's supply left.
Got Grandma's medication here.
Vera has a breathing disease and was running out of medicine, as they told our reporter Ranveer Singh.
It's always a constant worry when I go out to get stuff that I bring something back into the house. So if I do go out, it's a total disinfection of everything. I keep Grandma away from me, and then I'd go and take a shower, put all my clothes in the wash. You know, everything I can do to keep her safe.
They weren't the only Brits facing immediate jeopardy.
We are now officially in quarantine.
David and Sally Abel had been enjoying a world cruise in celebration of their 50th wedding anniversary. They were among 3,000 passengers and crew quarantined off Japan. At the time, the ship had the biggest concentration of coronavirus cases outside China.
Everybody's going to be concerned about contracting it, especially with such a high number being taken off the ship today.
Family at home in the UK were frantic.
I speak to them daily, and I'm very, very worried about my mum and my dad if they get separated. So I need to put my mind at rest that they're going to stay together.
David and Sally both tested positive for COVID and ended up in hospital in Japan. Thankfully, they recovered and were eventually allowed to come home. By now, the virus was running riot through Europe and spreading in the UK. On March the 2nd, Britain had its first death. On March the 11th, the outbreak was officially declared a pandemic. And on March the 23rd, the UK finally went into lockdown.
You must stay at home. People will only be allowed to leave their home for very limited purposes.
But could the government have moved faster? Richard Horton is the editor of the medical journal The Lancet.
We were too slow at the beginning of the pandemic when we knew that the epidemic was doubling every 2 to 3 days. We should have locked down in early March at the latest. And by waiting 2-3 weeks, that just gave us absolutely no opportunity to get the epidemic under control. And unfortunately, that was the reason why we've had tens of thousands of excess deaths.
At its height, the virus was killing more than 1,000 people a day in the UK, and the heartache of COVID was taking its toll.
We're putting ourselves in danger to try and save other people's loved ones. And it feels like a losing battle, but it's not.
The virus has tested the NHS like never before, putting frontline workers under immense pressure. And who can ever forget those Thursday evenings in the spring when we stood outside our homes to applaud all the key workers putting their lives on the line?
Health and care workers were paying the ultimate price, and so were care home residents. Significant numbers of elderly people were dying, some sent from hospitals to homes that were struggling to protect them.
Are we facing a care home crisis in the private sector? Absolutely. Like never before. We are really working flat out to ensure that everyone's loved ones are cared for.
So normally we'd be full of...
Sandy's team were looking after 55 residents, many aged over 80, with complex health conditions like dementia.
We are extremely short of masks and hand sanitizer, gloves and aprons, and certainly no face shields.
How different everything is.
Sandy's home near Ipswich suffered 3 COVID-related deaths. Thankfully, it's been clear of the disease since July.
It tells everybody that the temperature's normal.
The decision to discharge patients from hospital back home and into residential care homes was a monumental error of judgment. We knew that this virus was transmitted from person to person. We knew that it particularly targeted older people. So how we didn't understand that we needed to protect that population is indescribable.
More than 1/3 of COVID deaths were in the care home sector, according to a new study by Manchester University.
This is our weekly queue, look, for our weekly COVID test.
Today, the home conducts regular tests on staff and residents to try to keep the disease at bay. But the fear remains. From lives lost to lives in potential ruin. People who would never expect to rely on the state for income were left in desperate need as businesses were forced to shut in lockdown. Billions were spent on furlough schemes and grants to try to help. But an estimated 3 million people slipped through the net and didn't qualify for government support. Kim is a beautician and mother of 2 who started a small business from her home 9 years ago.
When I started, I did just have a wooden shed in my garden, but it was starting to be quite worn and torn inside. So it was always my dream to build something permanent in the garden.
Tragically, her husband David had died of a brain tumour in 2018. He'd left her a pension pot, and last year she used those savings to transform her studio. But like many, when the pandemic took hold, she had to shut down and then found she didn't qualify for any state help.
My diary was just emptying with weddings on an hourly basis, and then the weeks just went on and on and on.
Kim has begun seeing clients again, and she can now also claim universal credit. But like millions of small businesses in 2020, she's lost thousands of pounds of income. By the summer, lockdown was eased. People were being encouraged to get some normality back in their lives with schemes like Eat Out to Help Out. The initiative was also intended to help the struggling hospitality sector. But some believe there were serious unintended consequences.
The first lockdown that we had unquestionably was successful in suppressing the virus in our communities. But the big mistake was Eat Out to Help Out, because as we got the virus down through the summer, what we then did was encouraged everybody to go out and return to life as normal.
I think some of the messaging from the government in particular was that we've pretty much licked this virus. You know, it's on the retreat, we've given it a bloody nose. The reality is that there was still lots of virus circulating out there.
And that would mean more cases, more deaths, and more restrictions. The worst possible outcome for the industry, perhaps hit hardest by COVID, hospitality. In October, we spoke to Rebecca Brayshaw in Bolton.
Emotionally, it's draining. I feel, I describe it sometimes being almost like in a doomsday. I kind of sit one day with my head in my hands thinking, how can we ever get out of this?
Rebecca opened her bar just 2 years ago.
My bills and my cost to be here, my utilities, my insurance still racks up. Our business is people, and if we can't attract those people to us, then we won't have a business.
Bolton, like large parts of the country, is currently in Tier 3, which leaves bars and pubs closed. It means Rebecca and many others missing out on the lucrative Christmas season that normally helps keep them afloat. And the cost goes beyond financial.
My biggest fear is actually mental health. The pressure of operators and employees within my sector who have frankly been on a roller coaster since March. It's ruined marriages, relationships, communities, and I think it could take quite a few years to recover from that.
It's also ruined many of the businesses in the sector, with fear there's more to come.
I'm not exaggerating when I say that I think this government could be remembered as the government that killed off the traditional British pub. I'm talking about what I call our backstreet local community boozers, the boozers where for generations families have been going.
But the impact of COVID has been felt everywhere. Famous names have shut up shop or had to shed thousands of retail jobs. Debenhams is just the latest. Its 124 stores are likely to close after Christmas, with the loss of up to 12,000 jobs.
Coronavirus will be blamed for lots of things, but one thing is for sure, it has accelerated the decline of town centres and high streets, and it has encouraged people to use a different form of shopping. And as a result, that will impact town centres and high streets even further.
2 lockdowns later, we've seen the economy tank by over 10%, the worst fall in 300 years. 1 million people are forecast to lose their jobs over the next few months. And Britain, like many other countries, is walking an economic and medical tightrope.
At the very beginning of the pandemic, the World Health Organization advised all countries to test, test, test. If in the early phase of the pandemic we had tested and we had contact traced and we had isolated people with infection, we would have been able to get the epidemic under control. But by allowing it to develop, expand, multiply in the way that we did, we lost control very quickly.
And trust in government may also have been one of the casualties of 2020. particularly after the Prime Minister's then chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, travelled between London and County Durham during lockdown #1.
I think the Dominic Cummings effect has been massive. You know, I've got kids who stop you in the street who talk about the Cummings effect. People are angry. That has led to people actually thinking, well, actually, I'm not going to support these additional restrictions. I'm not going to follow the rules.
The British public have been magnificent. They responded in the early stage of the pandemic by adhering to mandates which would rarely be seen outside of war.
No, I have not offered to resign.
But I think because of the loss of trust after the Dominic Cummings episode, because of poor decision-making by government, it was not surprising that the British public lost confidence in the response.
Tonight contacted the government, who told us this is an unprecedented global pandemic and we have been working tirelessly, taking the right steps at the right time to deliver a strategy to protect our NHS and save lives and livelihoods. We have been guided by the advice of experts. We have built the largest diagnostic testing system in British history from scratch, helping to stop the spread of coronavirus through NHS Test and Trace, and have taken a huge step forward in our fight against the virus, securing 357 million doses of potential vaccines.
Prime Minister, are you optimistic already?
At times, non-COVID issues took over the headlines. The on-off Brexit deal between Britain and the EU. Megxit, Prince Harry and his family upping sticks and moving to America.
What's his name?
The Black Lives Matter campaign prompting big protests in the UK following the needless death of George Floyd. And the Me Too movement, vindicated when Harvey Weinstein was finally put behind bars after years of abusing women. But the virus has dominated everything and increased the gap between rich and poor, according to experts. Manchester United footballer Marcus Rashford became the public face of a campaign to end child hunger in Britain, even taking on the government. And his support for charities like FareShare, which helps get food to people who need it, has been immense.
2020 has been mad. We've gone from a pre-pandemic just under 1 million meals every single week to now regularly more than 2 million meals being diverted to people in need every single week. The Marcus Rashford effect has been massive. Both his donations and the donations of his supporters has enabled us to get 8 million meals out that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. And at the same time, it has shone a spotlight on child hunger, wider hunger, and the real need to be able to support the people who are most vulnerable in our society.
If any good has come out of the crisis, it's the remarkable way in which citizens and communities have come together to support each other, celebrating the essential workers who kept Britain moving during lockdown. The NHS, supermarket employees, delivery drivers, and of course the people who volunteered to help, including those who stepped up to participate in vaccine trials.
It's hard to overstate the pressure on those in power to navigate us through this crisis. But right at the end of the year, the scientists delivered what we'd all been hoping for, a vaccine developed at record-breaking speed. The UK is the first country in the world to use it. Now it's down to those in government to get it out to the public as swiftly as possible.
Just going to be squeezing your arm, okay? Okay. Relax your arm for me.
If you'd asked me at the end of January if we would have a vaccine by the end of the year, I would have said impossible. I think the international scientific collaboration that has produced these vaccines is one of the most extraordinary achievements in the history of humanity.
So when might we all be able to return to our old lives? Can we start by looking forward to a summer holiday abroad? Richard Slater has been in the holiday business for 35 years.
When we discovered that a vaccine had been found, we were very optimistic. We still knew there'd be challenges along the road, but it did give us a ray of sunshine.
tour operators are gearing up for the next 2 years.
I think the cautious traveller may not necessarily book in 2021. They may wait till 2022. Many of the 2022 holidays are now on sale a lot earlier than they normally would be.
But holiday makers may have to pay more.
Currently, some of the holidays for 2021 are at a higher price. We have to remember that some hotels will be operating at a lower occupancy rate. I think clients will understand that the prices may be a little more expensive, but they're willing to pay it.
So what do the scientists say about booking a holiday?
What I can be fairly confident about is that the data we have so far from the vaccines is very encouraging. We should start to see those roll out. That will hopefully have an impact on the outbreak not only in this country but around the world. And then as we start to see global cases fall, then that means that we will start to be able to lead more normal lives, and that includes travelling to various destinations.
And it's not the only industry where the green shoots of optimism appear self-evident for next year.
The bounce back in 21 is going to be phenomenal, and I can tell you, talking to festival organisers for Creamfields, Leeds, Reading, Latitude, their ticket sales are record sales. People just want to go out, people want to feel normal again, people want to go to a live music gig, to a nightclub, to a festival, and just get back to where we were.
And what could the new normal look like? Remember Khan? He was evacuated from Wuhan to England with his grandma Vera at the start of the pandemic.
I'm just on my way home from work.
Now he's returned to China, where there is no mass inoculation programme.
Everything is as it was before. My life is the same as it was before the pandemic started here. I'm out in the bars with my friends every weekend, go for meals during the week. There's no social distancing anymore.
All of these restaurants, they're all full of friends and families eating food. During the pandemic, this place was a ghost street.
I'm wearing masks a lot more often than I normally would have done, just in case it does reappear again.
He's still very cautious, and that's his big message from China. When Britain does return to some kind of normality, we must remain vigilant. In that sense, perhaps our lives have changed forever.
Unfortunately, I haven't a crystal ball, and I can't say for sure that we won't see another pandemic in my lifetime or anybody else's lifetime. These are random chance events, and when the next one happens, who knows when that will be, but let's hope that we're better prepared than we were for this one.
There's just no getting away from it, is there? For so many of us, this has been the toughest year in living memory. So from all of us on the Tonight team, we're wishing you the happiest Christmas possible, however you're celebrating it. And here's to a brighter 2021 ahead. You can continue the conversation using the hashtag ITVTonight on Twitter, as well as visiting our Instagram and Facebook pages, and of course our website, itv.com/tonight. So until next time, from all of us, good evening and thanks for watching.